"You'll regret ignoring me," she said, her voice trembling. Not with fear, but fury. The lilac perfume still clung to the crumpled letter in my hand as the sprinklers hissed behind us, misting the air like the start of a storm. That was the night I realized Deborah Kingsley didn't run an HOA. She ran a kingdom, and I had just spray-painted my mailbox the wrong shade of rebellion. It started innocently enough. A Tuesday morning, sunlight on the driveway, coffee in hand, and the quiet click of my new life settling into place. I'd just moved into Sycamore Ridge, a gated community that marketed itself as peaceful, pet-friendly, and prestigious. Translation: no loud music, no mismatched curtains, and God forbid your grass grows above regulation height. The first week was pleasant. Neighbors waved, lawns gleamed, and the air smelled faintly of new mulch and judgment. Then came the letter. It sat in my mailbox like a piece of treasure, or bait. The envelope was pink, the kind that looked expensive, sealed with a gold sticker embossed with a swan. It even smelled like perfume. Lilac, delicate but overwhelming, the sort of scent that made you think of lace gloves and gossip. Inside was a neatly typed note. Dear resident, welcome to Sycamore Ridge. It has come to our attention that your mailbox is painted in a non-approved shade of gray. The correct community color is Morning Dove Nachu 172. Please repaint within 7 days to avoid a fine. With warm regards, Deborah Kingsley, President, Sycamore Ridge HOA. It was signed in looping cursive with a heart over the I in Kingsley. A heart on an HOA warning. I laughed out loud. Surely this was a joke. I'd moved from the city to get away from power-tripping neighbors, not to become their next target. That evening, I mentioned it to my next-door neighbor, Tom, while we were both taking out the trash. Morning Dove Gray, he said, shaking his head. Yeah, that's Deborah's favorite color. She calls it elegantly neutral. Sounds like a prison shade to me. Tom's eyes darted toward the end of the cul-de-sac where a woman in a white visor was measuring a hedge with what looked like a ruler. That's her. Don't joke about it too loud. And that was my first glimpse of Deborah Kingsley, the self-appointed queen of Sycamore Ridge. Every day at precisely 8 a.m., she walked the neighborhood with a clipboard and a phone on speaker, barking instructions to the HOA board. She wore pearls with yoga pants and always had a faint smile that said she'd already decided who you were. I didn't repaint the mailbox, partly out of stubbornness, partly out of principle. How bad could it be? 3 days later, I received a friendly reminder notice. Then a notice of non-compliance. Both smelled faintly of lilac. I began to suspect she spritzed them personally. Then came the unannounced inspection. It was a Saturday morning, and I was halfway through washing my car when I noticed Deborah crouched by my mailbox, clipboard in hand. "Morning," she called without looking up, just verifying the dimensions. "The dimensions?" I asked. "Yes, we've had a few residents attempt to install oversized boxes. It disrupts the visual harmony." I blinked. "It's a mailbox." She looked up, smiling sweetly. "And yet, it's also a statement." For a week, it became a game of passive-aggressive warfare. I caught her snapping photos of my property at dawn. Someone left a copy of the HOA bylaws on my porch, open to the section about paint conformity. One night, a neighbor whispered to me at the mailbox. She once fined a guy for planting unapproved tulips. I started to notice how the neighborhood bent around her. Cars slowed when she passed. People adjusted their porch flags and smiled just a little too wide. It was Stepford perfect and deeply unsettling. The breaking point came during the HOA meeting. I decided to show up, mostly to see what kind of people willingly gathered on a Thursday night to debate mulch depth. The clubhouse smelled like vanilla candles and fear. Deborah sat at the head of the table, her pearls catching the light like a warning signal. "New business," she announced. "The issue of mailbox compliance." I raised my hand. "That's me." Her smile didn't falter. "Ah, yes, Mr. Miller. I must say, you have quite the creative interpretation of gray. It's gray. It's slate, and slate is not mourning dove. Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone coughed. Someone else scribbled notes like this was a congressional hearing. "So, you're fining me for paint?" I asked. "Not fining," she corrected. "Encouraging compliance. It's about preserving harmony." I leaned back. Harmony or control? Her smile froze for half a second. Then she leaned in, voice soft but sharp enough to cut glass. "If you think this is about control, Mr. Miller, you may not be a good fit for our community." That was the moment the laughter died in my throat. When I walked back to my house that night, my porch light flickered twice. I told myself it was coincidence. But as I passed the mailbox, I noticed something new. A faint smear of lilac lipstick on the corner of the flag. I looked up. Across the street, Deborah's curtains moved. The next morning, there was another envelope. No perfume this time, no gold sticker, just my name typed in block letters. Final notice. Failure to comply will result in legal action by the HOA. The air smelled faintly of smoke from someone's fire pit. Or maybe it was something else. Either way, I knew this wasn't about a mailbox anymore. This was about power. And Deborah Kingsley had just declared war. The hiss of water was what woke me. At first, I thought it was rain, until I realized the sound was too sharp, too mechanical. I looked out the window and froze. Every sprinkler head in my front yard was erupting like a miniature geyser, spraying directly into my flower beds with the precision of a military ambush. By the time I got outside, barefoot and half awake, the soil was a swamp. My new hydrangeas, the ones I'd planted that morning, were drowning under a river of HOA-regulated water pressure. I stumbled across the lawn toward the main shutoff valve, muttering words that would have gotten me fined under Deborah's "no offensive language visible or audible from street bylaw." That's when I noticed the sprinkler pattern. It wasn't random. The streams were angled perfectly toward my property line, like someone had reprogrammed them. My neighbors' yards were dry as bone. Only mine looked like a suburban disaster zone. The next morning, I was greeted by a familiar scent. Lilac perfume. Deborah Kingsley was standing at the end of my driveway, holding a clipboard and wearing a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, what a shame," she said, looking over the damage. "It appears the irrigation line malfunctioned. You know, these community systems can be tricky." "Tricky," I repeated. "Right, and I suppose it just happened to malfunction in my direction." Her laugh was light and perfectly practiced. "Coincidences do happen, Mr. Miller, but please make sure to clear the standing water before it damages the turf. We wouldn't want to risk mold." I wanted to say something clever, but I just stood there, staring at her pristine sneakers while mine sank into mud. The sprinklers clicked off automatically behind me. Perfect timing. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, going through the HOA's website, desperate for any clause I could use to push back. I found everything from fence height restrictions to garbage bin placement, but nothing about HOA-owned sprinklers. The system was collectively maintained, meaning no one was responsible, except apparently for the idiot who lived downstream from a power-hungry president. By day 3, the smell of damp soil had seeped into everything. My porch, my shoes, even the dog. I was starting to feel paranoid. Every time I heard a faint click or saw a shadow move past the blinds, I pictured Deborah in her visor, clipboard in hand, whispering into a Bluetooth earpiece. Then came the text. It was from Tom, my next-door neighbor, just after midnight. "You didn't hear this from me, but check the HOA group chat. Deborah doesn't know she added me by mistake." Attached was a screenshot. The chat name, Community Standards Enforcers. My stomach dropped. There were photos, my mailbox, my half-flooded lawn, even a close-up of the hydrangeas before the incident. Beneath each image were comments like, "Non-compliant display of vegetation. Again. He'll cave soon. Let's make sure he learns what maintenance means." And Deborah's own message, We must preserve community harmony. If he won't adapt, we'll encourage him to. Encourage. The word glowed on my phone screen like a threat. The next morning, I printed everything out, screenshots, timestamps, even the chat title, and marched straight to the HOA office. It wasn't much, just a small room behind the clubhouse, filled with fake plants and motivational posters about community excellence. Deborah looked genuinely pleased to see me. "Mr. Miller, I was just drafting an update about your situation." "Funny," I said, tossing the papers onto her desk. "I was drafting one, too." Her eyes flicked down, scanning the pages. For the first time, the smile slipped. "Where did you get these?" "Let's call it a lucky malfunction." She sat back, crossing her legs, and let out a small, humorless laugh. "Those are private communications, taken out of context. You're not authorized to access them." "Neither are you authorized to sabotage a sprinkler system," I shot back, "or to stalk residents, or to use an HOA chat to harass people." For a moment, the air in the office went still. Then she leaned forward, voice soft as velvet. "Mr. Miller, you should be careful what you accuse people of, especially when your own compliance record isn't spotless." That's when she opened a manila folder from her desk, my file. Inside were photos, notes, even timestamps of when I'd left my trash bins out. She'd been documenting everything. "I'm not your enemy," she said, folding her hands, "but the HOA board does have influence. You wouldn't want to be known as difficult." "Too late for that," I said, turning toward the door. "You started this war, Deborah. Just don't be surprised when I start fighting back." She didn't stop me from leaving, but I could feel her watching through the office window as I crossed the parking lot. The sprinklers around the clubhouse turned on automatically, spraying in neat arcs that glistened under the morning sun. For a moment, they looked beautiful, until I realized one of them was pointed straight at my car. I got in just before the water hit the windshield. When I pulled out of the lot, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Tom. "Careful, Deborah's calling an emergency HOA meeting tonight. You're the agenda." The sprinklers shut off behind me, one by one, in perfect rhythm. I drove home wondering how far a person like Deborah would go to preserve harmony. And deep down, I already knew the answer. All the way to fire. The night my house burned down, Deborah Kingsley stood across the street in her robe and pearls, the flashing red lights of the fire trucks dancing off her HOA brooch like a crown. She clutched a mug of something steaming, tea maybe, and whispered to a neighbor, "Such a tragedy. I warned him about faulty wiring." But the wiring wasn't faulty. And deep down, I think she knew that I knew. The fire started just after midnight. I woke to the faint crackle of something unnatural, the kind of sound you feel before you understand it. Then came the smell, acrid, chemical, wrong. By the time I reached the hallway, orange light was already bleeding up the stairs, painting the walls with ghostly flickers. I called 911, grabbed what I could, and stumbled into the street barefoot, coughing. Flames clawed through my living room window as my dog barked hysterically in the neighbor's yard. The air tasted like melted plastic. People gathered in driveways, whispering behind their hands. And there she was, Deborah, standing tall and still, pearls perfectly aligned, as if she were hosting a neighborhood barbecue instead of watching my life burn. When the fire captain approached her, she was all concern and composure. "I told him those extension cords were a hazard," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's such a nice man, but he doesn't understand community safety." Community safety. That's what she called it. The firefighters fought for hours, but by dawn, the house was nothing more than a black skeleton of beams and ash. The smell lingered on everything. Smoke, scorched wood, and the faint hint of lilac perfume that made my stomach twist. I caught her watching me as the last flames died, her face unreadable. The official report came a week later. The cause was listed as undetermined, but the fire marshal asked me to come in for a follow-up. When I arrived, he was sitting behind his desk with a folder and a look that said he didn't believe in coincidences. "We found traces of accelerant near the back fence," he said, flipping open a photo. "Gasoline. Not spilled. Poured." I swallowed hard. "So, arson." He nodded slowly. "We also checked the security cameras from the neighborhood gate. You've got a motion sensor near your garage, right?" I did. He slid a printed still across the table. It was grainy, but clear enough. A figure in a cardigan, walking briskly along the fence line. The shape of the hair, the tilt of the chin, it was unmistakable. Deborah. My first reaction wasn't rage. It was disbelief. Because people like Deborah didn't do things like this. They sent letters. They wrote passive-aggressive memos about recycling bins. They didn't sneak around at midnight with a gas can. Or maybe they did. When the police showed up at her door, the neighborhood erupted. Cars slowed to watch. Curtains twitched. She greeted the officers like guests at a brunch. "Of course, I'll cooperate," she said sweetly. "I've done nothing wrong." But the footage, the accelerant, the matching shoe prints, it was enough. Deborah Kingsley, president of the Sycamore Ridge HOA, was arrested for first-degree arson. The community tried to act shocked, but I could see the cracks. People weren't surprised, just relieved it wasn't them. Within days, lawn signs disappeared, the HOA Facebook page went silent, and the annual block party was postponed indefinitely. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt watched. Even after she was gone, I'd catch myself glancing at the mail slot, half expecting another lilac-scented envelope. The empty lot where my house once stood became a reminder of how far a little community harmony could go. Months later, when the trial began, I made myself go. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee, and the benches creaked under the weight of gossiping neighbors. Deborah walked in wearing a navy suit and pearls, of course. Her hair was perfect, her expression calm. When the judge read the charges, she didn't flinch. But when her eyes found mine across the room, her smile returned. Small, controlled, dangerous. Her attorney argued it was a misunderstanding, that the footage was inconclusive, that the gasoline was residue from a gardening tool. The jury didn't buy it. They convicted her. But as the verdict was read, Deborah didn't look at the judge or the bailiff. She looked straight at me, and she winked. Afterward, as she was led away in handcuffs, one of her pearl earrings glinted under the fluorescent lights. I caught my reflection in it for just a second, a distorted version of myself, the difficult neighbor, who had survived her suburban crusade. Reporters asked for interviews. The HOA board dissolved. For a while, Sycamore Ridge was quiet. Too quiet. Then, about 2 weeks after the sentencing, I received something in the mail. No return address. Plain white envelope. Inside was a single photo. My rebuilt foundation, taken from across the street. On the back, written in perfect cursive, were 3 words. Harmony always returns. The faint scent of lilac filled the air as I dropped it to the floor. I stared out the window toward Deborah's old house. The porch light flickered once, then twice, just like before. And for the first time since the fire, I realized maybe Deborah Kingsley never really left Sycamore Ridge.